Well, thanks so much for joining us today and for saying yes to my invitation. And hi, everyone, and welcome to our session today. My name is Candace Giesbrecht, and I'm the director of the Remote Performance Academy with teamit.com, where we help companies grow, leaders achieve, and employees thrive in remote work. If you have attended one of our webinars before, you already know Alistair Shepherd-Cross, co-founder and president of Teamit. Alistair, it is always a pleasure to riff with you, especially on a topic like today.
Thanks, Candice. Great to be back. We love putting on these events, these webinars. And Chris, we haven't met before, but pleasure. And I'm not sure if you're a big soccer fan or not, but and I doubt you support England, but I'm just guessing.
Let me think about that.
So we're not dragging you away from the TV anyway. So
no. I think the games are on later on in the afternoon. Sadly, Ireland is just looking on and seeing what the other home nations are getting up to.
There you go. Exactly. Anyway, Candice, thanks for the intro. And yeah, so for the last 6 years, Teamit's specialty has been to help growth-focused technology companies recruit, cultivate, and sustain high-performing remote teams. And the pandemic has and continues to accelerate a major shift in the workplace that was already underway. As we move into the next phase of this seismic event, we now have choice and options, which in some ways is an even greater challenge than what came before. Many of you are probably asking, what is the best path forward for my organization? I'm sure that our conversation with Chris today will help give you some ideas as to what's possible and how the new workplace is rapidly evolving.
Yeah, I'm so excited about this. Chris Kane, our guest today, is co-founder of 6 Ideas, a global community of thought leaders focused on workplace development, placemaking, and innovation. His book, Where Is My Office?, draws on his knowledge and experiences in commercial property to investigate what the 21st century workplace needs to look like. He worked in corporate real estate for over 30 years and for some pretty big names, was VIP of international corporate real estate for the Walt Disney Company. They might know if have a little bit of commercial property, and head of workplace at the BBC. Chris, as I told you in our call when I first reached out to you, this quote from the introduction of your book, it totally stopped me dead in my tracks. So I'm just going to read from that. It's now an accepted fact that business agility is no longer a luxury, it's critical for survival. But what has been ignored so far is that an alignment between workplace and purpose is a key tool in managing agility. Chris, there is so much in that sentence. I underlined it. I reread it about 4 different times. Can you walk us through what you meant by that?
Wow. Well, I guess thank you to you guys to have a chat with people in Western Canada. I'm a great believer in spreading the message, but also in building my own learning, because we're all in this together, and nobody has got any answers about anything at the moment because everything is up in the air. And if you look at life pre coronavirus, we were already on a roller coaster of change. I think there may well be 1 or 2 people. I see Paula Skidmore and others maybe who may have had the experience we had at the BBC of moving that organization from analog to digital. And that underpinned the need for all organizations, public, private, big and small, to be aware that agility was pre-lockdown the name of the game. I think what a lot of people didn't realize was that there was a clear link, and that was one of the reasons for writing the book, around to ensure you have a productive workforce. It helps to have a productive workplace. Now, the challenge for all of us is that traditionally that workplace for knowledge workers, and the context for today is the office, which is only one part of the entire economy and the entire workforce, and we need to be cognizant of such, that the umbilical cord between the individual worker and and the desk, which is the unit of currency for calculating space, etc. That was broken, that was cut 15, 20 years ago. And I think what we're seeing now is that coronavirus, dealing with that, has cut the umbilical cord between the individual and the workplace. And you mentioned about choice. I think it's not about choice, it's about ubiquitous choice. And that's a very difficult construct for many people to get their heads around. And, call it the look of the Irish or whatever, but I finished with the help of my good friend Eugenia writing this book January, February of last year. That's when we sent in the final proofs. And then lockdown happened, and Bloomsbury, our publishers, were very supportive, and it was great to get a big name like Bloomsbury to publish an unproven author, but they said, don't make too many changes. And I had until May, I think, to do it. So we changed 5 or 10 sentences and 1 or 2 paragraphs, and it was, I think many people thought I'd written it during lockdown to talk about the fact that the entire workplace game, ladies and gentlemen, has changed. It has changed fundamentally. And if we thought it was all about agility, it's now agility on steroids. And the other word that has come into our vernacular is resilience. Mm-hmm. And, so I think we've got to, and that's why I was keen, to participate in this conversation, and that you as an organization seem to be having a much broader perspective, thinking beyond the traditional design silos or the traditional HR silos. I've just finished a Clubhouse conversation about busting silos, and it was remarkable how, everybody concluded that we now need to realize that everything is connected to everything else. So whether you're leading an organization or driving public policy or designing buildings or running HR initiatives, it's all connected. And to be connected, you need to be agile. Did that get you started for 10, Candice?
Yeah, oh my gosh, definitely. And you mentioned Clubhouse, and Chris, you're on Clubhouse every Tuesday, or most Tuesday mornings, I think.
Yeah, most Tuesday mornings, and it's great to see folk from the West Coast of both America and Canada. Just can't, I've got to recognize that.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to do is build a conversation, and, tying in with the Northern California Cornet Global Mosh Pit, which happens on Fridays. The more of us converse about all of this stuff now, the better, because we don't have any playbooks or precedents to fall back on. We are in a true era of experimentation. I think when the history books are written about this period of the 21st century, it will hopefully be regarded as the 21st century Renaissance.
Yeah.
Right, I totally agree, and I think also it's just the acceptance that we really don't have the answers, and people shouldn't feel bad or feel that they're floundering because they don't have those answers, and anyone that says that they do is lying, really. So it's that embrace the change and be iterative and try different things, because I think everything's going to be different for each company. That they have their own.
So here's challenge number 1 for this discussion this morning. The design industry, stop cookie cutter design offers. Really engage the training, the innovation, the insights, and the inspiration that professional designers would have all received during their training, which may have been stymied in their professional careers because some people would say, we can't afford this or we can't afford that. Mm-hmm. It's not about cost anymore. It's about delivering a new set of solutions. And, if anyone hasn't read Leonardo da Vinci's biography by sort of Isaac Walterson, read it, because it gives you a lot of views on what he did in terms of, he wasn't just a painter. he was a designer, and a whole raft of other things. And that's where we've got to go. We've got to get out of our silos. We've got to embrace the broadest amount of thinking we can, but also have open, honest conversations with stakeholders outside our immediate circuits.
Yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely. So Chris, I have another question, obviously. In your book, you talk about how your time at the BBC was sort of pivotal in terms of your view of the workplace. Could you describe what your role was at the BBC and what this time did to impact your view of the role of the physical workspace? And just for people who haven't read the book, just to put a bit more context around it, in chapter 4, entitled People and Place, Joining the Dots. In it, you describe what you call a learning relationship you form with Caroline Waters. For those who haven't read your book yet, would you mind telling us a little bit about when and where you met Caroline and why your time working with her was so significant?
Oh, there's a lot of questions there, David. You're getting value for money this morning. Okay, so I would describe myself as a lapsed property person, by profession a chartered surveyor, which is the standard nomenclature for people this side of the Atlantic. And I quickly learned that if you wanted to be involved, particularly on the consumer side of the equation, you had to have a much broader range of skills. I was very fortunate to be asked to take the lead of a fantastic group of people called BBC Workplace, used to be called BBC Property, as we helped the BBC move from analog to digital. It was a once in a lifetime opportunity to help an entire organization transform, because in contrast to many other experiences members of the audience may have had, this time around the BBC had no choice but to change, and its leadership recognized that, and they provided the sponsorship and the encouragement to get on and think the unthinkable and do the undoable, like moving 5 of the 20 divisions out of London. It was unheard of. It's now 10 years old, that move, and it's probably one of the most successful relocations, certainly this side of the Atlantic. But in going on that journey, I wanted to make sure that everyone coming on the journey had the opportunity to learn and develop, but also to give them the air cover as the person accountable for the team to to try different things and break out of the mold. So one of the things we did was we rebranded the property function and got out of the facilities and design and real estate silos, and we called ourselves BBC Workplace, and we had 2 simple functions. We operated the estate and we changed the estate, and we understood the relationship between them. But it became very obvious very quickly in that journey that it wasn't about the bricks and mortar, that was important, but it was about the people and the process and the technology. Things that we've talked about in CoreNet in particular around people, process, and place for years, but we've never quite cracked it. So I had a go with that, and I quickly realized that you needed to build very strong relationships with technology colleagues and with HR colleagues, but also, particularly if you're in a large organization, you run the risk of getting stuck on the weeds on the day-to-day operational. And I made sure, with the help of some executive coaching, to keep my head, one eye sort of over the parapet and look out and scan the strategic environment for what was happening. And we commissioned people to do sort of surveys around what would a creative workplace of the 21st century really look like, and invested time in seeing what was happening in the west coast of the US and other things like that. But also looking at other organizations, and British Telecom is the British equivalent to AT&T or Verizon, and I can't recall the Canadian version, so my apologies. And they had started a massive transformation years ahead of anyone else. They had a Work Style 2000 agile working / ABW strategy way back in 1999-2000. And the lady driving all of that was their HR director, my good friend Caroline Waters. And I reached out to say hi in 2005, and she was impressed that I had took the trouble as a property person in her eyes then to come out and ask her, could I chat with her and learn things? And we, as individuals, clicked. We shared ideas and stuff while she was at the BT and I was at the British Broadcasting Corporation. And we've continued working as partners every opportunity we can since then. And Caroline was recognized for her efforts in driving the transformation of BT, but she really understands the people bit. And she helped me understand why it's all about people and place, not place and people.
Right.
Wow. So that brings me to the next, my next question, Chris.
God, you guys are quite a double act here.
Oh, I tell you.
Back and forward.
So in your book, and by the way, we just recommend everybody picks up a copy of this, of the book. It is absolutely worth, it's worth.
Yeah, where's my office.com?
Where's my office.com? It's available, anywhere you would get books for sure. But you say, Chris, that there needs to be a holistic approach across IT, property, and HR. And on this call, and a lot of the people that we interact with regularly are both HR and IT, and the technical professionals. And so, you state that ultimately that holistic approach between the three creates a stronger and more impactful delivery system for the organization and its people. So as lockdowns shift, vaccines roll out, what do you think this holistic approach could or should look like?
Wow. Well, I think just a little bit of the backstory to why I wrote that was that it became very clear to me, at Disney and then in the BBC, that everybody was paddling their own canoe in terms of the support functions within organizations. Real estate did one thing, technology did another, HR did another. And then when I looked under the hood of the various functions, I found, like, say, real estate, there's the sub-tribes, as I call them, of pure real estate, facilities, design, construction. In HR, there's, policy, pay, rewards, learning and development, and a whole raft of other things. In technology, there's infrastructure, technology, apps, etc., etc. So we're a myriad of silos, all doing great professional work focused upon their bit of the value chain. Yet none of us actually really thought about the value chain holistically, in terms of how does an enterprise basically create value? How does a public body create public value? And what's our contribution to that? And how do we interrelate with the others? Now, for many years, particularly in the 20th century, there was no great need for anyone to do more than just their bit of the contribution to this value chain. And then, I'll blame it all on the technologists, because, they provided the ability for ICT to start with. That then started to give sort of question to the need for people to be tethered to a desk Monday to Friday, 8 to 5. And then you had the shifts in terms of cloud storage. In the last year or so, how much paper has disappeared out of our system? When you have Adobe Sign, DocuSign, even our legal friends are now much more comfortable than ever before with having contracts signed virtually. The thing that happened in the last 14, 18 months was that all of this technology existed, but it was being applied in an incremental and a piecemeal basis. And then it all had to be joined up. And we found here banks in Britain realizing they hadn't sufficient VPN capacity for people to work at home. One other big bank, I think, had to buy 24,000 laptops. And that's where I go back to the point I made earlier about resilience. Because, and this is a slight segue in trying to answer your question, but it's important to make the point as I think of it. If you think that everything is going back to normal after Labor Day, as it's known in the US, then you're going to be badly mistaken. We are in pandemic times for the foreseeable future. And what I mean by pandemic times is both the health issue and the economic issue, because the economic dimension is not evident yet, nor is the fact that we may see more variants or all this. So we're in this for a couple of years. Hopefully we'll, but what that will do, that will nail significant behavioral, attitudinal, and societal change. But going back to the point around this holistic approach, everybody was, doing nicely, doing their own good stuff. And we were seeing this convergence taking place around how people work, how technology has helped them. I mean, the arrival of the smartphone, the smart device, all of that. And we see that the human side, the managerial side, managers adhere to the principle of presenteeism. That's gone out the window. But more importantly, employees now realize that they have choice, and they're making life choices rather than career choices. Now that can be good and bad. In many ways, as Caroline Waters would say, it opens up huge opportunities if you're interested in the equality, diversity, and inclusion agenda, in that there are many people who cannot work in downtown offices for a variety of reasons. Now opportunities for them to work and to be treated as equal is now available. We also are seeing the ability for people to be much more distributed. And that means that the support systems, which are real estate, technology, and HR, have to really work together like never before. And that's where I made the point that we need some holistic thinking rather than individual. And there have been turf wars. I've seen them. I've got the T-shirt. I know what they look like. They're not pleasant, but they're understandable. Those need to be put to one side, and we need to join the dots and come up with effective ways of developing strategies for organizations to help them be resilient. And in some cases, that strategy will be based upon a distributed workforce, which then gives rise to, do you need a distributed workplace portfolio strategy? And that may fit for some people, it may not fit for others. And the analogy I would use to describe this, and to describe also, I think, how work will evolve, is derived from what happened to retail 10 years ago, when retailers realized that online marketing was a major threat. And they tried to deal with this by looking at how can they provide their customer with a seamless experience in their purchasing journey. And that gave rise to something called omnichannel marketing. And omnichannel marketing means that regardless of where you come into the process, whether it's a website, as a result of a mail shot, as walking through a store, etc., that journey is as seamless as possible to ensure that that retailer concludes a sale with you. So what I'm saying is we now need to think about office work, knowledge work as omni-working, which defines that it can be done anywhere, any place, any time, and by anyone, be it human or machine learning stroke AI. So this opens up enormous opportunity, a lot of challenges in terms it may well frighten people who would prefer to retain the status quo. But I think it's there's more opportunity than challenge. Hopefully I've addressed your question on that. It was a bit rambling, but I think I tried.
No, it was good. Yeah, absolutely. No, it was a great response. And I just think it's, the fact that this change was already going on within the workplace pre-COVID. You need this catalyst, which was the pandemic, to sort of make it become mainstream, forcing it on people and helping them to recognize that, some of the old biases that they have that were holding organizations back from embracing remote and distributed work really were debunked during the pandemic, and that, companies could function. I mean, I think it's
agreed. And, that was one of the reasons why I wanted to just, write a book to help business leaders understand how to see the link between a productive workforce and a productive workplace, and also then share some of the learning and all, but also to start a debate amongst this community in particular, how we can make smarter, more sustainable use of the built environment. And one of the things we all need to do, Alistair, is within our wider stakeholder group is to be better able to communicate how we can add real value in a variety of ways. And that means we've got to really think about our language. And that's why I partnered with Eugenia, who is an independent journalist, because I wanted somebody who can help me not fall into the trap of talking workplace speak or real estate speak or whatever, because everything is changing, and many of us who've been around the block for a while have got 20th century mindsets and thinking. And if you look at space, for example, we're trying to manage space using sort of metrics from the machine age, where people were treated like machines. You've got to do this amount of work for this amount of time, etc. That's gone out the window.
Right. Actually, that sort of moves nicely into sort of my next question, which is it's really around messaging, because there are a lot of leaders who are talking about leaders and founders, senior, the C-suite essentially, who are sort of talking about getting back to the office. I mean, my view should be, well, by using that term, it's sort of going back to old ways of doing things. It sends a message of it's going to be like it used to be, and we're all running back to that old safe zone, which I don't think is accurate at all. I mean, I'm talking about with our own team. If we ever go back to the office, we'll be moving into our new office, for example, because it sort of sets this tone of new, different, what's possible. And so, as the vaccines roll out and the restrictions lift, can you give some thoughts about, how leaders should be messaging during this time to their employee base? Because we're already starting to see cracks appearing, which is not surprising, as we now actually have options. We're seeing companies actually messaging, and there's lots of issues on social media now because it spreads like wildfire as soon as the employee base goes, well, I don't want to go back for 5 days a week. And, remote doesn't necessarily mean we're working like we are right now. It means it may be 2 days a week or 3 days a week. So people misinterpret these terms all the time. So I'm just intrigued to get your view on it.
Good. Oh, you guys, you don't half-ass some interesting and complicated questions. Okay, let me see, can I break this down? I think you make a great point about language. So let me start with a generic comment. And I'll go back to the point I've just made. We in the workplace sector, in all its guises, whether you're HR, design, real estate, or whatever, technology, we're all there, as a part of a value chain to support an enterprise, be it public or private. And look at the language we have chosen to use over the last 20, 30 years. Let's start with hot desking. Another great phrase. If you introduce that to an organization, regardless, the first thing, what does hot implies? It's hot, it's dangerous, whatever. And then we use this word remote working. Are you going to be ostracized? And for those who on the call, with a HR background, and particularly in sort of an anthropological sort of perspective or a psychological perspective, they'll say, well, do you mean that remote working means I'm ostracized, I'm cast aside? And then this word hybrid. Hybrid, perfectly suitable word in many respects, but it's something between between two bookends. Is that all we can do? Are we limited in our imagination in the context of how we can come up with solutions to redefine the workplace over multiple dimensions, thinking about it from an omni-working point of view. I mean, you can work in a CBD, you could work at home, they're the two, sort of main, but you could also work in third places. Are we going to see the emergence of local work hubs where not one, but 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 colleagues in the same organization can congregate in local work? I think there's some great work being done in the Far East by Standard Chartered Bank, where they have a strategy around, working locally and closer to their clients and that side of things. So, this is our opportunity now to think outside the box. And that means we have to develop our skills at communicating to make the argument more coherently. So then, trying to address your question about leaders and what they're saying, well, I suppose the flippant answer is not what some leaders have been saying over the last few weeks. Witness, the as you said, the employee response to the Apples of this world and others on both sides of the Atlantic and further afield. We've got to get out of this 20th century command and control mindset. And also we have to respect the fact that social media is much more powerful than it ever was. There was always the talk about how a negative commentary on Twitter could kill a brand. The acid test for any employer going forward is to be seen as an employer of choice. So that means they are going to have to be able to offer flexible working conditions. And in the context of their built facilities, those facilities are going to have to step up to the mark to be places where people would want to go there. Now, this is not about, shiny workplaces and bean bags and nice food and all the baristas. That's only part of the equation. They need to think more about the people side of things and what will make it safe, appealing, attractive for somebody to consider commuting to a location a couple of days a week. And this is, if you think about it, seismic, because it goes against all the current management thinking around, I have a workforce, there are X thousand people, I've got all their numbers in a spreadsheet and the payroll, and basically I'm going to manage all of them in a uniform fashion. Any HR person on this call worth their salt would say you can't do that because people are individuals and they're now exercising their individual rights to ask for things, which is going to cause chaos to the traditional ways of management thinking. So you're going to see a whole wave of new books coming out and new advice around how to manage the agile, fluid workplace. And the implications for those of us interested in the physical component of that is that workplace can be in a number of locations rather than in one fixed location. Now, whether you regard that as a challenge or an opportunity, that's up to you.
Do you think there's been, I personally believe there has been a major shift in power in the last 16 months between the employer and the employee, in that the employee has infinitely more influence and power than they've ever had, and that leaders maybe aren't realizing that, because even people that they employed 16 months ago, or they've worked at the company for 5 years and they've just they've been working remotely for 16 months, they think they're the same people. Well, they aren't. I don't believe. I think they're different, more liberated. And so in a sense, the office is a way to get to control the masses again, to control people. And so what are your views on that, as far as where the power lies now and how you deal with that?
For 8:30 on a Tuesday morning, that's a very profound and deep question. And I think you can look at this in a number of ways, but the reality is that all of the 20th century traditional power paradigms have been challenged, and some have been changed dramatically. witnessed the early part of this century where the power of production in terms of consumer goods has shifted to the consumer. You witness the transition from mass standardization to customization. You look at all of those aspects, and I think that's what's been happening to knowledge work in particular. And you look at the the World Economic Forum projections. What is it? 85 million jobs will disappear over the next 3 to 5 years, but 95 million new roles will emerge. And if you look at that stat, that's fairly scary. But the implications for such is that both leaders and middle management will need, if they're going to be successful, to upskill or be changed. And that's going to cause a lot of turmoil in the system, which frankly hasn't been accustomed to too much turmoil really in that respect. It's impacted blue collar working, where automation in particular, has changed a lot of things. And people were afraid then that, there was going to be large scale unemployment, and the converse sort of happened. And I think that's what's going to happen here too, is that basically what we're seeing is the final bits of the jigsaw in our journey from analog to digital. And the way we have worked in the context of the office, many people would describe it as a paper processing factory. Traditionally, for those of us who, as I said, have a few years in the block, would remember that we had to have not only desks but filing cabinets. How many filing cabinets do we need in traditional workplaces now, I ask myself. And that's just one physical manifestation of this massive shift that's been taking place. Now, some people who are involved in leadership and management roles, either for a variety of reasons, I guess, which we probably won't have time to go into today, but either haven't recognized or haven't wanted to recognize all this stuff is happening. But they're going to see it in stark reality in the months ahead, because employees are voting with their feet. And they're saying, if you look at all the surveys, people are now reporting that pay and reward is no longer, a numero uno requirement for employees of all ages. And this is not just restricted to millennials or Gen Zs. People are now making life balance decisions that they never thought they could. And for those that do, they are. Who would have thought, say, on this side of the Atlantic, one of the most traditional of organizations, the British Rail Transportation Authority, they're now offering flexible working tickets, instead of the traditional season ticket, which presumed Mr. Office Worker or Mrs. Office Worker or Ms. Office Worker would go to work every day, Monday to Friday, 8 to 5. So, even accepting that as a shift, that's huge. Now that has implications right across the board, from technology provision, cyber security at home and all of that is a concern, to leadership, to working, to how people are treated, to how you balance physical and virtual working, how people are managed, how they're led. And that goes without saying into the physical side. Do we have too much office space? Have we hit peak offices? What is the future of the CBD, of the business park? Some really, really big questions, and they're all interconnected.
Yeah, fascinating. I could talk about this stuff for hours, but Candice is itching to ask her next question.
I am, because actually, wait, Chris, it's like you're looking at my list of questions here, because I'm really hopeful that that when we post this the recording of this webinar, that there will be meetings between HR leaders, ops leaders, and tech leaders within companies, that they'll watch this recording together, and that they'll then go, okay, what are we going to do with what we've heard in this conversation? What are the and so I wonder if we play out that scenario, if you could speak to that group of three, or those stakeholders that represent each of those, and what are the most important questions that you think they need to be considering as they look at, like, say, the next 90 days?
We're missing one group.
Who are we missing?
Policy makers.
Oh my gosh, you're right. Yeah.
And that's part of what we're trying to do with Six Ideas, is to create a forum to bring together the consumers, the providers, and the policymakers to try and look at these things in a holistic and an objective manner. And I mean, if you look at it, we've got a lot of people and a lot of stakeholders, and you're right. Maybe you've got to start somewhere, and that those three are fine. But we also have to say that, I mean, policy, procedure, the legal side, all of that sort of stuff needs to be taken into account. So you look around the world and see what's happening, and Spain is now starting a national experiment with 4-day working. I'd be very interested to hear or learn what Canada is doing, or what the various provinces, I think you would call yourselves. I got that right, didn't I?
You got it right. Yeah. Wasn't a county.
Yeah. Well, we'll come back to sort of your British sort of offline, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But the my own sort of native Ireland, probably I'm proud to say one of the few governments which have actually published a policy paper on this. Mm-hmm. And in contrast to many others, they've actually linked together people, process, and place. Mm-hmm. So there's some people issues around the right to switch off after a certain number of hours. There's the investment in broadband technology, and there's creation of a national hub of remote working opportunities. So that's a good example. And if anyone wants it, I can share the link. I'm not good at multitasking, but we can share it afterwards with you to give you, so that you can read what they're doing. And my challenge then is to the Cornets, to the BOMAs, to all the other professional bodies: stop talking about stuff that's happened in the past, and stop looking at sort of in the rear view mirror, and lead an honest and open conversation. And that goes to the HR professional bodies, SHRM, and all of those. We're all in this together. We all need to figure stuff out together, rather than pursuing what I would call 20th century analog thinking and analog procedures. So I think the things to look at, if you were to get that triumvirate of people around the table, is how can we ensure that the workforce gets back to a better way of working, which may mean reopening central district offices, but in a safe and a sustainable manner. And then in parallel with that, what experimental programs do we need to devise for our organization that will give us a chance to look at how we develop a resilient and sustainable organization over the next couple of years. And I think in all of that, the challenge is that resilience means to have an organization which has the ability to be dispersed at short notice, and also to come together when the needs as well. So, and I think it's going to be a patchwork quilt, because everyone is trying to figure out the panacea. There isn't a standard specification going to emerge out of this, which everyone can look at and everyone can apply to, because it'll depend on the organization, where it is in its life cycle, its leadership, its culture, and what are the current challenges it's facing. So it's some really big stuff, and many people are choosing to stick their heads in the sand and say this will all blow over. Is that a good strategy? That's up to them.
No. And in the chat here we have a message from Sherry. And it says there are at least 3 of us from the National Research Council, federal government, on this call. They did a survey, and over 50% of the employees want the option to continue to work from home. I'm one of the ones who wants to continue. They're apparently working on how they can do this. 100% from home, then a hybrid option for those that want to go into the office, how to do so safely. So I'm so excited about the fact that we have government, we have enterprise, we have individual contributors on this call, and just a wonderful and thought leaders we have.
But I would say to Sherry and everybody, please do not restrict your thinking to the binary either or of home versus the office.
Mm-hmm.
What could it do? And we've got the technology, and the technologists on this call would say there are at least a dozen apps out there which people can employ to say, okay, well, maybe my home circumstances don't permit me to work from home in a productive fashion, but yet I'm worried about going back to the office in downtown Vancouver or Calgary or wherever. And is there another option? And you look at, and this goes to the macro point of view. Cities have sucked the lifeblood out of towns and villages in every country in the world. Could it be that one of the positive byproducts of these dreadful 16 months we've gone through is that there's a reappraisal of saying, do you know what? Maybe those towns could have local work hubs, whether they be provided as part of the city infrastructure, underused public buildings, libraries, etc., or could some entrepreneurs say, do you know what, we'll provide a work hub where not only individuals, but groups of individuals. There's a great case study in Northern California. One of the pharma companies, Genentech, 12,000 people. They give everybody, and this is pre-pandemic, a card, which means rather than commuting up the 110 highway and logjam, they can go into, I don't know, San Jose, or they can go to Redwood City and find either a Regis or a WeWork or any number of flexible provider and just have a desk there which is curated by their employer. So it's fit for purpose, it's got the proper VPN, etc. And they can go there as individuals, but they can go there as small groups. So that's what I mean about dispersed working. And technology exists, the HR capabilities exist to allow this to consider. The real estate facilities system needs to pull up its socks.
Yeah, and I think it sort of speaks, when we recruit for our clients, for example, we try and build pods of talent for them, even though they're hiring remote talent. It's pods of talent in certain geographic areas, which kind of helps, I think, what you're saying, which is you've already got, companies tend to, when they hire, even if they're doing it remotely, they'll build talent pools in specific geographic areas just because that's where the talent exists and they know each other and they tend to refer each other. So you kind of have these built-in groupings of resources already that you can then, find, as you say, these workplaces that they can congregate in. So I had another question about retention and attraction, because it's a hot topic, particularly in the tech sector, which is where we focus our time. There's sort of infinite number of opportunities for everybody these days because there's no geographic barrier. You can essentially work for anyone anywhere. And that is a very interesting topic in itself, and the trickle-down effects it has on many things. But when you look at the physical office space and how companies move forward here, do you feel that if a company gets it wrong now with the world we're living, is that enough to sink them as an organization?
More leading questions. My God, what an interesting. I honestly think it is.
Yeah.
And a month or two ago, I might have been more guarded, but just look at the stuff that's been released in the public domain, where white alpha male CEOs have gone in there and laid it out, and that's all very well, but look at the reaction. Look at how people can convene support through social media. This is all uncharted territory. Now, whether it's right or wrong is not for me to say, but we are living through a period of ubiquitous choice. We've never really experienced this before. There are no playbooks or precedents to deal with this sort of stuff, because in contrast to everything in our living memories of people on this call, I mean, whether it be the GFC or the early 90s recession, this is very different because it's happened to everybody right around the world all at the same time. Now, the best example I can give you is part of our little 6 Ideas community is based in Australia, and Australia being an island and has, you know, come out of the lockdown and the virus reasonably well. They would say they're probably 80–90% back to, you know, pre-COVID activity. I won't say back to normal because I don't think any of us. And their experience, and this comes from my colleagues and also from 1 or 2 of the big professionals for services firms out there, are saying, yeah, but the war for talent has not only got hot, it's got red hot.
Yeah.
And people are saying, I don't want to work for you, Mr. Employer, or Ms. Employer, but it's normally Mr. Employer. And I just want to have flexible terms. And that means I want to work. And in Australia, you have a variety of choice, whether it's the big coastal cities of Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, or Perth. But people want to do things differently. And the interesting thing there, and some of my friends who are anthropologists have confirmed this, that also here in Britain and also across the wider Europe, that this thing about family. Many parents, particularly dads, have realized, and let me give you a very quick case study. A individual who was became a dad last year of twins, and he has decided to resign from his job, which was a safe, secure job. And you can imagine, you know, being the father of newly born twins, he'd be concerned about financial security. No, he said, I love having the ability to give my sons, my twin sons, breakfast and to bathe them in the evening. If I go back to work, it means a 40–80 mile round trip car journey, typical commute for lots of people. Don't want to do that anymore. So he's taken the risk, and his wife is supportive of him in doing that. Now, this guy is late 30s. So that is not the stereotype of people looking for flexible work per se. So if it's happening there, and I know that's a one-off example, but I'm willing to bet that if you get people really answering the surveys in an honest fashion, which I sense people fill in lots of the surveys we're using today on which to base our decisions may well be jaundiced. I think there's something really significant happening to society. I think we're going to see a big shift away from the focus on shareholder value and profit at all cost. I think you're going to see an emergence of a concept of stakeholder value. I think you're also going to see a lot of talk about the age of human, not the 4th or the 5th industrial age or the new digital age, but about getting back to things which are important, which are human beings, which is how we treat our fellow people on this planet. Our planet is a very precious place, and many of us on this call are, property, real estate, construction, design professionals. We're custodians of the built environment. We have a duty of care to leave a better legacy for those that follow us, and we're not doing a very good job of it. And it's now urgent. The clock is ticking, and it's no longer about the generations that follow us. It's actually about our children, because they are going to suffer beyond our wildest fears in terms of climate change and the impact on our biodiversity and all things in between. So that's the serious bit.
Mm-hmm,
yep.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I'm going to combine our last two questions. Just to wrap up our time, Chris, this has just been amazing. So you talk about in your books space as service, and I wondered if you could just talk about that concept just as a final thought.
Okay. We exist in a system which is underpinned by the lease, and the lease has two parties, a landlord and tenant. And if you think about all of that, and I'm sorry to bore all the technologists and the HR professionals in this call, but may well be a little insightful for you in terms of how a medieval system with medieval mindsets and constructs continues to dominate how we consume a significant part of our built environment. In the last 10 years or so, various people have tried to offer a wider choice of how we consume the built environment to include service. And there's no real clear definition. I'm sure Canada has a view, the various parts of the US has a view, certainly Britain has a view about what space as a service means. But in essence, it means that people can consume the built space, offices, workplaces, on a much more flexible basis. I think the ideal portfolio going forward in the future will be a mixture of fixed commitment, flexible commitment, space on demand, space at home, but also third spaces and public spaces. So we're moving to a much more, I think, a plug and play. I think we're seeing a shift from fixed to fluid in terms of how, historically you could only buy a building or lease a building. Now you have to be able to consume these buildings, and these buildings have to be attractive, and they have to be serviceable, and they have to be operational, and they have to be safe, whether that be a touchless building, but also, or maybe ones with ventilation. How many of our large CBD office buildings have ventilation systems which may not be fit for purpose in the context of virus transmissions? One asks oneself. Some big questions. Many people feel these things are a challenge and don't want to deal with them, and it'll be all right in the night. And others, the WeWorks is probably the poster child for one particular aspect of space as service. There are other aspects as well, and we don't have time to go into the detail of what the current thinking is, but there's a myriad of emerging choices. And that's before the system disruptors really start to impact the real estate sector. There are a whole raft of disruptive technologies waiting in the wings being developed, which are going to change the workplace real estate industry like never before. So it's, I'm sorry to be less than accurate about this, but it's all work in progress at the moment.
That actually sounds accurate to me, Chris. Chris, it has been an absolute privilege to have you here. I'm so grateful for your time and for you saying welcome. Yes to this. And we have been recording this.
Candace.
Pardon?
It was your charm, Alistair.
Yeah, I did nothing.
Well, we're so grateful, and we will be sharing the recording out to the people who registered. And as well, we'll be sharing it out. It'll be available on demand as well for people to download from our website. As well, for people who registered for this, we will be doing a draw for a couple of books, and we'll send that as a door prize. Who doesn't like a door prize? And as gratitude for people arriving here. So Chris, thank you. And if people want to interact with you, they can join you on Clubhouse on Tuesday mornings. The hour before this was on.
It's an early start.
Yeah. And of course, the website one more time, Chris.
For the book, it's where'smyoffice.com, or you can get me at chris.kane@sixideas.com.
Thank you so much.